So she's like, oh, if they have a fork, and they don't have chopsticks. If they have a fork, obviously they're going to pick the fork because it's easier. So to her mind, she couldn't understand if you had a choice why you wouldn't choose the fork. Because to her, culturally, she could not understand why that didn't fit in her worldview, 7-year-old worldview. So, you know, from a societal perspective, like what I said with digital natives, digital immigrants, we're always biased to our own worldview. What's difficult, what's easy, the way we use technologies. We find it difficult to think a different way. So, you know, that always will affect us. So thinking is interactions of the brain and body with the world. So those interactions are not evidence of or reflections of underlying thought processes. They are instead the thinking processes themselves. Okay? So this is something that, you know, is very hard for my students to consider because it seems contrary to common myths about thinking. So we're used to, you know, in English, the way we talk, that thinking is something that occurs within your brain. It's a cognitive process. Okay, Hutchins talks about thinking as interactions of the brain and the body with the world. Okay. So thinking doesn't occur within the brain. Thinking is your brain interacting with the world, your body interacting with the world. So, without your senses, without your body, there would be no purpose to thinking. We're used to talking about, our cognition, things that we think about. Oh, I'm thinking to myself, I'm speaking to myself. But it's that connection to the world that makes thought meaningful. Without that connection, the meaning, there is no meaning. So in the same way, if I invented a new language, it's not meaningful until other people also speak it. So there's an old joke about Alexander Graham Bell. So Alexander Graham Bell is the one who invented the telephone. And so the joke is that Alexander Graham Bell is celebrated for inventing the telephone. But really, he should be celebrated for inventing the second telephone. Because when he invented the telephone, he couldn't do anything. When he invented the second telephone, he could actually call somebody. So it's the same way with thinking, that it's the connection, being able to talk and to work with someone else to make like a computer without a keyboard, without a monitor. It's still a computer, but it's not very useful. So objects do work in particular ways. They are not only additions to the social or emergent properties of the social, but they're the stuff that society, from which society is built. So not only is cognition interacting with the world, but this is the flip side, which is society is built on objects, is built on technology. So another myth of Western thought is, you know, we have too much technology. You know, we need to go back to basics. You know, we need to eliminate technology from schools. We need to eliminate all these distractions. But the reality is that our society is built on technology, that our technologies, our objects, is, you know, is what we use to create society. So I showed you that photo of the arrowheads and the variety. Okay? This is our modern arrowheads. Okay? So we have on the left, this is the very first cell phone. Okay? You know, I remember being a doctoral student in Florida. At Florida State is Tallahassee. And Tallahassee is where the state capital of Florida is. And so at the state capitol there are a lot of politicians and lawyers. And going to the school, you drive by the state capitol and you'd actually see lawyers and politicians with the very first cell phone. Really big. They were expensive and very expensive to use and expensive to own, but you'd see people with these giant cell phones carrying them. And so it was you know, a very strange thing. And then you can see how our cell phones have gotten, before we had smartphones, the big thing was to get smaller, 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 smaller. So it was a sign of prestige to have the smallest phone possible. And then now we've gone to the smartphones, and it's the opposite, to have the biggest screen possible. So the bigger screen, but just like those arrowheads, that it's the variety of the phone that we now see having the functionality. So the message is that that as we look at the technologies of the future, the technologies you know, are very important. That there are lots of technologies to look at in terms of, you know, we have iPads, we have tablet computers, we have regular computers, laptops, and we have various ways to connect: wireless, distance education, mobile learning. But you know, my message is that you know, whatever you're looking at or whatever you're applying, you know, to focus on culture, the culture of the school, the culture of the students, the culture of the educators, and also the social aspect. So how are they being used? What are the aspects of the communication? What are the aspects in terms of the perceptions, the attitudes of the individuals using the technology? Because the social aspects are going to continue even as the technologies change. So, you know, the person using this cell phone is communicating in ways that, even though the cell phone changes, the communication is going to be very similar. And that's going to be very important. I think we're going to have a break. And so we're going to have a break for about 15 minutes. and then we'll come back here to continue. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Is there?
Thank you, Dr. Gall. เราจะพักเบรกประมาณ 15 นาทีนะคะ แล้วก็จะกลับมาพบกันในเวลา 11:45 นาทีนะคะ ในช่วงนี้ถ้าใครได้ทำแบบประเมินเสร็จแล้วนะคะดิฉันขอให้ส่งที่ตรงโต๊ะลงทะเบียนเล็กน้อยนะคะ แล้วถ้าใครมีคำถามนะคะภาษาไทยนะคะขอให้ส่งก่อนนะคะภาษาอังกฤษถามได้เลยนะคะขอบคุณค่ะที่2ต่อเลยนะคะ
Okay. So we have about another hour, and so I'm going to spend maybe another 15-20 minutes concluding my remarks. And then the remainder of the time is really for questions and discussion. And I really encourage you to, like your dean said, to ask questions. And so feel free to ask questions in English if you want. Try. But if you're more comfortable asking in Thai, feel free to ask the questions in Thai. I won't tell the dean. You can ask your questions in Thai, and I will answer Chai, my Chai. Yeah, that's the only Thai I know. So you can ask yes or no questions. No, you can ask your questions in Thai, and we'll translate them for me. But please, ask any questions that you like, or if you have any comments. So with this size of a presentation, it's really good to have interaction. And one of our themes today has been social interaction. So I benefit as much as you do from hearing what you have to say. And hearing about the discussion. So again, to kind of finish up or talk about, so one of the themes has been that that we human beings, what makes us different. What makes us different from the animals? Yesterday I went to the big market, Sunday market, in Bangkok, Jame, and so I saw the animals, squirrels, snakes, turtles, dogs, cats, chickens, ducks. I like animals. My parents had a farm in Pennsylvania, so I grew up on the farm, and we had cows and sheep and chickens, and my brother lives there now, and he doesn't make a living on the farm anymore, but he has some animals, and his wife has horses, and so we ride horses for fun. And so I like animals. So if I could fit them in my luggage, I would buy squirrels and dogs and ducks and try to sneak them past U.S. Customs. But what makes us different from the animals, or the closest animals, the apes, the chimps? Well, it's our brains. It's it's our ability to use tools. You know, the technology is what makes us different. You know, it allows us, you know, to think, and you know, so without tools, you know, it's a relationship that we have with you know, the world, is that, you know, yes, our brains, you know, allow us to create tools, but our tools have helped us develop our brains. And that's one of the things that Prensky has talked about and Vygotsky has talked about, that when we create tools, the tools increase the complexity of our interactions with the world. And so once we begin using tools, we interact with the world differently. And we interact with the world more complexly, in more complex ways. So when we develop language, suddenly we interact with people in more complex ways. So, you know, as I'm here in Thailand, and I don't know the language, you know, my interactions, you know, are more difficult. And so, you know, I feel lost sometimes. Okay? So, you know, during the break, you know, I see 2 doors to the restroom. But it's like being in a casino. It's like I can bet on one or I can bet on the other. But 50% I could lose. So I have to ask someone, I have to be social. Okay? Well, which door should I use? So language, you know, our language skills helps us in so many ways that we take for granted. And that language helps us. When we develop writing, suddenly we're not dependent on the things we can remember. Our ability to write and to record things. So now, not only do we socialize, but we interact with people from 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago, people from other countries, you know, people, you know, through books, through writings, we interact with lots of people, and you know, we don't have to memorize everything. We even talk to ourselves. So when you're in class, you write a note, and a week later, you talk to yourself. Oh, that's something I wanted to remember, and I can look back and see this is something that I forgot about, but I've written a note to myself. So writing expands our knowledge, expands our ability. Then we create technologies for images, photographs, and you know, this is, you know, when I was younger, one of my gifts in high school was a camera, and I took pictures all the time, and it used to drive my parents crazy because some of you may not be aware of this, but you actually had to buy film. And you would buy film and take pictures, and then you had to go develop film. So every time you press the button, dollar, 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 dollar. So I took pictures all the time, everywhere, everything. And so my parents, before digital, it's like, oh, you waste money. You take pictures of everything. But now that I'm older, my parents sisters always call me, do you have a picture from, remember that we had that party and this and that? Of course I have a picture. I took pictures of everything. Oh, remember that car we used to own? Wouldn't it be nice if we had a picture of your brother driving? I have a picture of that. I took a So now they say, oh, you are the historian of the family. You have an archive of everything. So they appreciate that I took that. So it's another form of memory. You know, Facebook today, you know, we take pictures to remember, to preserve events, to supplement our memory. So again, the technologies, you know, build our culture and expand our memory and our knowledge and our cognition. And you know, that's the theme the main theme I want to leave you with is that, you know, when you see new technologies, that you think about, well, how does this affect our thinking? So, yeah, it does affect our education, our educational system, our students, but also think, how does it affect our thinking, our society, in positive and in negative ways? So, you know, when I look at my niece, you know, that you know, she's growing up in a culture where you know, she's using tablet computers, she's using digital cameras. You know, I have videos of her, and you know, when she was 3 or 4 years old. So, you know, not something we probably would do today, but you know, there was a novelty. It was new, and you know, kind of anything, you know, anything that they would try, they could. So, you know, and this was, you know, and this was something that, you know, lasted for quite a while. That you know, there were different types of things that was done, where they would show news, they would show educational films, but it was seen as a real positive technology. Okay, one of the things about every technology is that because it's new, the people promoting the technology think that, you know, it has the possibility to really change the way we do education in lots of different ways. So Thomas Edison, who was a big proponent of the motion picture, okay, you know, thought that, just as Prensky did, that the motion picture could be great as a stimulant for the brain, and that there, now this is not necessarily cognitive theory, but he suggested that that motion pictures activated the brain and stirred up sluggish brain cells. So there was not much science here, but basically that the action of the motion pictures excited students in ways that traditional educational materials couldn't. And this is something that we always see with new technologies, is that there's always a sense that the new technology will help the educational system. So this is something that we see whenever we bring a new technology in. So we see it with writing, we see it with the printed word, the printing press, we see it with motion pictures, we see it with television, we see it with radio, we see it with the computer, we see it with internet, we see it now with mobile devices, that when you look at the history, that there's always individuals that say, well, this is going to change education, and it's going to replace everything else, and that it's always going to be a better approach. Now, when you look at the history, that one of the things that happens is that it does change, okay? But it doesn't change in the way that people usually think. It changes culture. And that's what we usually miss out on. That motion pictures are still around. Now they're digital, okay? But motion pictures certainly have changed culture. I don't know if people have seen The Hobbit yet. I'll have to wait till I go to the U.S., but people around the world go to movies all the time. They watch movies at home. Movies are a big part of our culture and how we share stories and interact with each other. They are an important part of education. But their form changes. But movies did not eliminate written words. So some individuals who thought that movies would eliminate books, that hasn't happened. It maybe have changed the way we looked at books. And, you know, people's reading habits have changed because of movies and because of television. So the culture changes as a result, but it doesn't necessarily eliminate it. When we look at things like radio, we still have radio with us. In the United States, in the 1930s and 40s, radio was about programs, dramas, plays that were acted out on the air. Now, in the United States, radio is mostly music. So the content has changed, but it's still with us in terms of how it's used. There is, in distance education, there's people that are writing that distance education is going to eliminate colleges and universities. And that's something that in the U.S. people are writing about, that YouTube and free online courses will eliminate American universities. Well, I'm a little biased, so I hope I can still make a living teaching, and don't have to get a job making YouTube videos. But I think that I don't think that it will eliminate universities and colleges, but it will probably change how we do our job, and it will change the culture. When the telegraph was created and used in the United States, and the telegraph was strung in the 1800s, late 1800s. And the telegraph uses Morse code, where it's dots and dashes. So beep, 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 beep. When that first was created, there were people that wrote, this is terrific because students will take classes over the telegraph. So if you thought learning English was hard, imagine discussing with a professor over the telegraph. Okay, do you have a question? Yes. Okay, here's the answer. Be sure to write this down. And this would go on for 3 hours. As we look at new technologies, we definitely experiment, like that child that Luria and Vygotsky talk about. That we see a new tool, and we engage socially with it. So we don't say, oh, I hear that the iPhone 5 is coming out, so let's sit down and make a list. Okay, how will this affect me when I'm driving? How will it affect my friends? Well, let me get my Facebook friends today. Let's make a list. Okay, with the iPhone 5, I'm going to like my photos differently. Maybe I'll post this differently. No, we don't deal logically in a well-planned way. Someone gets an iPhone 5 and suddenly, boy, I noticed you're posting more pictures now. Oh, it's my iPhone 5. It's incredible. Oh, geez, maybe I should get an iPhone 5. Oh yeah, I can't believe you're using a 4. That's so old. So we get a tool and we start working, and the culture, the society changes, and we experiment, and those things enter the education, and we learn. The same thing in terms of the U.S., that one of the things we're finding with the iPad, it's very similar, that when we I've got a student who has done a study with the iPad and looked at how graduate students in our university are using the iPad in their own study, their own personal study. And she's working on an article with me that she's going to publish on that. And what she found was that the graduate students, they would purchase the iPad for themselves, or if they were lucky enough, their parents got it as a gift for them. But they would bring their iPads to class, and for the most part, their teachers did not plan specific things that they could do for the iPad, and the school did not plan specific things for them to do. But they would figure out things that they would do personally to help them study, and they would start sharing with others. And so she talked about one student who was in class, and the teacher was explaining a concept that was rather difficult. And the student on their iPad connected to the internet and brought up an image of what the student was, or what the teacher was trying to explain. And so the student was showing the iPad to another student in the back of class. The other student said, "Oh yeah, that's exactly what he's trying to talk about." And pretty soon they were passing the iPad around the back. And the teacher, of course, thinks that they're, oh, it's Facebook. What are they doing back there? So the teacher said, what's going on back there? And they hold up the iPad, and he's like, no, that's what I'm trying to explain. Let me see that. And they started passing the iPad around. And so it became part of the teaching, where they said, yeah, this is what I'm trying to explain. So it becomes integrated into the educational experience, but in a subversive way. So it was not planned as part of the educational activity, but again, as a tool, just like my niece with the cartoons, you see how it can be useful, and you begin to use it. And so that's what we see with various technologies, that the technology gets created, we have opportunities to use it, and then as educators, it's really our responsibility to help those situations, and also to provide guidance. So I like that metaphor of it's like we're farmers. So we when the new technologies come along, we can add the water, we can fertilize, but we also need to pull the weeds. So when we do see technologies having a negative impact, so when students are distracted by technologies, Donald Norman, who's a popular writer on technology, talks about disrupted technologies. So technologies can be very disruptive. I know for doctoral students, in my doctoral seminar, one of the habits I have to break doctoral students of is don't do your lit review in Google. That Google becomes so popular that students often want to start there, and it's using a good tool the wrong way. So that we have a very good library, we have very good search tools, we have very good databases, and so the students and myself, I use Google almost every day, but using Google to find web-based things, but using databases, literature databases, library resources to find literature, to find journal articles, and not fall into the habit of using Google for more specialized tasks. Okay? So that's an important thing to teach students, to not use the wrong tool for a task. Now what I'd like to switch to is how kind of the fundamentals of adaptive tools, on our development. And so I'm going to switch to even older. When we look at cognition, when we look at thinking, we can look at an area called cognitive archaeology. And this goes back even further, that cognition is about how we think. Cognitive archaeology are individuals who study human thought and symbolic behavior from the ancient past. Right? And archaeology is an interest of mine, so not an academic specialty, but something I've always been interested in. This is actually an archaeology dig in Colorado. So in Colorado, we have, this is actually an Indian village from about 1200 AD. So, almost 1,000 years ago. But, we can look at ancient ruins, ancient artifacts, and look at how people use tools and their thought processes. And this can also help us understand how we use tools today. Because